Mark Merriwether Vonderbruggen is a PhD, and he has been studying native plants and edible wild plants for many, many years. And I'm just really excited to see what he has to share with us.
All right, so tonight we're going to talk about 9 medicinal native plants of Texas. These are plants I specifically chose because they meet the needs of many of the current health issues that people are having. They're easy to identify and they're easy to use. But before we actually get into the plants, you did give a brief introduction. Thank you, thank you, thank you. But again, for those of you who don't know me, Mark Merriwether Vorderbruggen, PhD. The PhD, my original plan was actually to be a medicinal chemist working for like Pfizer or some company like that. And so I did get a master's in medicinal chemistry and a PhD in physical organic chemistry. So not someone who makes the molecules, but someone who takes the molecules that man or God has created and applied them to the modern world's issues. And so that was my goal. I ended up sidetracked in the oil industry for quite a few years, but even there, my job was to come up with natural products that could be used in replacement of traditionally less natural oil field chemistry. So I have no concerns about what I did in the oil industry. But more recently, finally, 3 years ago, actually, 3.5 years almost, I finally got to do what I meant to do, and that was Medicine Man Plant Co., bringing ancient plant medicine, scientifically supported, to help with the modern world. Of course, some of you may know my website, Ph.talks.com, currently has over 225 plants and mushrooms that are edible or medicinal, including range maps showing where in Texas they are, what time of year to look for them, recipes for them, how to turn them into medicinal concoctions, and if there's poisonous mimics, how to tell them apart, usually with side-by-side pictures. And then, of course, right now, the Outdoor Adventure Guide Foraging, that's the book that's currently out. The Idiot's Guide Foraging is no longer in print. And the last time I checked, copies were going for over $200 a piece, which was very nice for my ego, but not so good for people actually looking for that book. But there's the Outdoor Adventure Guide Foraging, currently available on Amazon for under $20. It's a really good book. I will say the book was designed to cover all of North America, but there was no travel fee or no travel expenses included in the contract to write it. Luckily, though, pretty much every plant in North America, or most of them, all the really good ones anyway, can be found somewhere in Texas. So I never actually had to write, or never had to leave the state to write a book talking about edible plants of North America. All right, because we are talking about medicinal plants, I got to throw the FDA disclaimer up there because I don't want to go to jail. I'm far too pretty for jail. But disclaimers: you should consult a licensed healthcare professional before starting any herbal supplement, especially if you are pregnant or have any pre-existing injuries or medical conditions. Second, these statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any diseases. That being said, being a medicinal chemist trained in the chemistry of medicine, when I am talking about medicinal plants, I need scientific proof. And my main place for getting this is the National Library of Medicine, their website, pubmed.gov, where you can type in the name of any plant, add the word medicinal behind it, and it will bring up any and all research that has ever been done on that plant. And not just here in the US, but around the world. So this is a worldwide clearinghouse for scientific research papers. Many of the papers, you can actually get the full paper. Some you can only get the abstract, and some all you'll get is the title and who wrote it. It depends on who actually paid for the research. But especially if it was the US government, so at a university usually, or something of that nature, no pun intended, the full text will be available. So when I'm going through tonight, even though the FDA says I can't say these will cure, protect, or do any good, science says they do. All right. So like I said, tonight we will be looking at the plants that I thought were particularly useful for modern times, modern issues, and easy to find, easy to identify. And as she was mentioning, there are a number of these plants that will actually be for sale at the plant sale coming up. All right. What I like to do actually, and I'll require like Trisha or Catherine's help, after I finish talking about a specific plant, I will pause and ask for questions on that plant, and then answer like 2 or 3 questions. If there's more than 3, then we'll save the following 3 for the end. But I like to take at least the first 1 or 2 questions of the plant right there when I still have the plant slides up. So rather than waiting all the way to the end. All right, so without further ado, let's talk one more important thing. So how do you use these plants that I'm going to talk about tonight? And the 2 most common ways is what's called a tisane, which is just a fancy herbalist way of saying a tea. When you think about herbal teas, you're actually thinking about what an herbalist calls a tisane, because technically it is only tea if it includes the India tea plant. Otherwise, it's just a hot water tisane or infusion. So, but a tisane, the standard way of using these medicinal plants as a tea is 1 tablespoon, heaping tablespoon of the dried plant in 8 ounces of hot water. You steep it in there for 10 to 15 minutes, strain it out, let it cool down to a safe temperature, and then drink it usually 2 to 3 times a day, depending on the issue and what sort of results you're getting from the plant. On the tincture side, a tincture is where you infuse an alcohol with the plant materials. And in this case, you would do 2 ounces of dried plant material in 5 fluid ounces of 80 to 100 proof. So for every 2 weight ounces of dried plant material, you want 5 fluid ounces of 80 to 100 proof alcohol. Traditionally, it would be vodka, because vodka is basically just water and ethanol. And so there's nothing else in there that might mess around with what you're trying to accomplish, as opposed to say gin or wine, where there's all sorts of other compounds in those alcohols. And so they can have unexpected side effects. So ideal, 80 to 100 proof vodka. In this case, you want to steep the dried plant in the alcohol for 6 to 8 weeks, shaking every day. And then when it finally comes time to start using it, usually you'll take 3 to 6 teaspoons per day of this tincture. Now, once it's made into a tincture, the consensus is by both herbalists and science that it's good for pretty much forever. Whereas if you are using dried plants, after about 2 years, you want to replace those dried plants with fresh plants. At that point, you'll still have between 80 and 90% efficacy of the dried plant material that you're using to make the tisane. But just to have 100%, you're going to go with the replace it at least every 2 years. All right. Are there any questions on how to make a tisane or tincture or their use? So we will pause here for a few seconds.
So Mark, I'm not
Yes.
seeing anything in the Q&A.
Okay. Then we will continue on. And we can always at the end, if you decide you missed something, we can go back. But all right. So you mentioned frog fruit. I love frog fruit. So this is a great ground cover, especially for full sun sort of areas. If you're not familiar with it, it does have the opposite leaves. It has the small little white clusters of flowers. It is a creeping ground cover. I see a hand raised, Catherine. Is that a question?
Yes.
Or, okay.
So And there was a question about replacing or adding more.
Adding more. Okay, let me
I'm
open the
not
chat.
sure. It's
Normally I
from
keep,
Lauren.
because I normally keep the chat closed because otherwise it's distracting to me. That's why I have the questions asked.
A
So when
dry
you are
plant to
asking a
tincture.
question,
Sorry, can you add more dry plant to a tincture?
yeah, so you can, but then you would alter how much you're taking per day. One of the nice things about doing this ratio is it's basically the ratio that herbalists have developed over really hundreds of years, maybe even thousands of years of testing. And it's a pretty good base starting point. If you do add more, you may get more out, but the end result is when you make it again to get the same results, you have to make it the same way each time. So I guess that's what I'm trying to say. When you make these, if you decide to add more plant or, or less plant for that matter, and you figure out how much you need to help you, you need to just do that same ratio from then on out. So then everything stays the same. Scientists like repeatability. And one of the ways of getting repeatability is by using the same amounts of everything each time. So you can add more, but just remember you add more and write it down. Okay, so back to frog fruit. Like I said, you'll often see this as a creeping ground cover with the little tiny, they almost look like pineapples wearing a little white halo or crown of flowers. So what are they good for? All right, first off, they are anti-diabetic. So they help control blood sugar by stimulating production of insulin. So if you are a type 2 diabetic having problems with excess blood sugar, usually you're on something like metformin, the frog fruit will help you with that. To the point where you have to be careful, especially if you start adding a frog fruit tea, or sorry, tisane, into your daily take, there is a risk of dropping your blood sugar too low. So if you start taking frog fruit tea or tincture and you find yourself getting unusually tired, that just means your blood sugar is getting too low. Another good use of frog fruit, especially in the tea form, it is very antimicrobial, not just external, but also internal bacterial infections. So not viral, but it does help fight different bacterial infections, especially in the gut and in the urinary tract. Less effective in lung type bacterial infections. So like a bronchitis or a pneumonia wouldn't necessarily be my first choice, but along the gut and like a bladder infection, kidney infection, those sort of things, the frog fruit tea is very potent for. It is a liver protector. So what this means is it helps protect damage being done to your liver from all the different toxins that we're encountering through our daily life. Remember, the liver, it is the waste disposal system of your body. Its job is to gather up all the toxins that you are taking into your body, slapping some glutathione on it to make them water soluble and tell the kidneys, hey, get these out of the blood, send it out the body through, through the urine. So the liver really experiences the most concentrated poisons in the body, and frog fruit has been shown to help protect the liver cells from damage. Now, if you're dealing with cirrhosis of the liver or something like that, it's a really strong battle. Hopefully, if there is something damaging your liver in your life, you can figure out what that is and try and avoid it. But for just day-to-day liver protection, frog fruit, it's a really good thing to have in there. So like I said, a tisane or the hot water infusion is really the best way of doing it because of the particular compounds in it. Plus you're getting extra water, and especially if you're diabetic, you don't want alcohol, or you should have very, very limited amounts of alcohol. So the tisane is a much better way of doing it. You can also cook it, like a steam it, treat it kind of like a spinach. Raw, it is a bit tough and doesn't have necessarily the best flavor. But if you air dry it and make a tea out of it, the flavor is actually pretty good. It works great, really. All right. Any questions on frog fruit? I said it makes a wonderful low water ground cover in full sun. If you can get away with replacing your front yard, if you have a south facing house, replacing the St. Augustine grass, which serves no purpose whatsoever, with frog fruit, that's a winning proposition there.
So could it possibly undo liver damage?
As far as undoing liver damage, the best it can do is slow down the damage that is occurring, and then hopefully the body can help repair itself. The liver is actually very good at repairing itself if you can protect it while it's doing so. If you know anything about liver transplants, they don't actually have to transplant the whole liver. They can take just part of a liver, and over time it will grow back to almost full size. So if you can protect the liver, now liver cancer or really bad cirrhosis of the liver, that's pretty much permanently damaged. Also, certain poisonous mushrooms will be more than the frog fruit can protect against. But definitely the day-to-day, and even some acute things like gasoline, hydrocarbons, a number of cleaning supplies, things like that, the frog fruit will protect against.
And Mark, what
You have
parts of the
another
plant are
question?
used?
Okay, the medicinal part for this is really the whole plant, the leaves, the stem, and the flowers.
Okay.
And we do have another question. Does the frog fruit need to be dried first to make the tea?
Yes, you want to air dry it. You want to give the enzymes time to break down the cell wall. So when you put it in the hot water, there's escape routes for the medicinal things. Let's just talk about that quickly, because maybe not everyone understands this. But when a plant dies, the last thing it does really is trigger an enzyme whose purpose is to start breaking down that cell wall so the nutrients inside the cells can be returned to the soil. That's why when you're freezing green beans, you blanch them first. You stick them in some boiling water to screw up that enzyme. So when in the freezer, that enzyme isn't still chopping them up. But you want to let the plants air dry for about 2 weeks. What will happen then is you will have holes through the cell walls. The water will escape. And once the water is gone, that enzyme stops. But you've pretty much made plant jerky, but with lots of holes through the cells. So when you put it in the water, you got an escape route. Do not heat dry it. Do not use a dehydrator. Do not use your oven, because that will force the water out. But for the most part, the cell walls will remain intact. So you won't be able to get all the medicinal compounds out. And say, if your house doesn't look like a witch's workshop, you're doing it wrong. All right. Anything else on the frog fruit?
There's a couple that folks that are putting comments over in the chat, and maybe I'll find them, but if y'all will, please try and use the Q&A so I can keep them straight. So is there a substitute for insulin type 1 diabetic is one question. Another is, does frog fruit aid increased cell receptors to sensitivity to insulin?
Okay, so let's answer the first one, or the second one first. The insulin sensitivity, where the body is not utilizing the insulin properly. And from what I've seen of the mechanism of this, it is more a stimulator of insulin rather than the insulin sensitivity. So in that regard, with the type 1 diabetes, where the pancreas is no longer making insulin, assuming the particular cells in the pancreas responsible for making the insulin, the frog fruit may help with that. But the type 1 diabetes, it's a bit trickier to do beyond the scope of tonight's presentation. So, but if you contact me through Medicine Man Plant Co., there's on the website, there's a link to email me I can give you some other suggestions there. All right, ready to move on? So that's one down. We got 8 more to go. So next one, stinging nettle. In particular, the one we have here, the Erotica chamaedriotes, and I know I'm saying that wrong. When you think of stinging nettle, you think of the Erotica dicata, the really big stinging nettle. Whereas here in Texas, we have this little heartleaf stinging nettle, which is actually an amazingly wonderful plant. So it has the opposite alternating leaves and square stem. It has those stinging nettles, and you find it winter and spring in damp, shady woods. But what does it do? Well, the main power it has, it is a very potent antihistamine. So when someone comes to me with allergies, the blend I recommend for them, stinging nettle is the primary component of it because it really does help it. So histamine is basically how the body, it's the alarm molecule. When the body is injured or under attack, the cells release histamine, which tell the thymus, hey, we're under attack, get the immune system going, cause swelling, cause irritation, so the person knows they're hurt. So the antihistamine properties of the stinging nettle help suppress a lot of that. It lowers blood pressure, which again is a key thing in many people's lives here. High blood pressure, it was one of the factors that led to death in COVID. But overall, it's one of the major health issues here in the United States. A lot of people have high blood pressure, which causes all sorts of secondary damage throughout the body. So the stinging nettle tea also helps lower the blood pressure. And then reducing inflammation, especially in joint pain, arthritis, osteoarthritis, or even like sprains and strains. Also with things like lupus and autoimmune diseases, the inflammation from that, where the joints get really sore and swollen. The stinging nettle helps with that. So this is another plant that you dry it first and then make the tisane out of it, the hot water infusion. You can also eat it, but I recommend going to foragingtexas.com to see how you eat it, because you don't just grab it off the ground and shove it in your mouth. That's going to hurt a lot. You do have to cook it just a little bit, usually steam it or stir fry the stinging nettle. But really for the medicinal properties, the best is just to let it air dry and then make the tisane out of it. So any questions on stinging nettle? I know it seems to be very common in horse pastures and llama and alpaca type pastures where people are having those. So any questions? If not, on to the next. Goldenrod. And I will tell you right now, it's extremely unlikely that you have an allergy to goldenrod. Goldenrod, the pollen of goldenrod, it's very sticky and it requires bees or other pollinators to transfer it between flowers. At the same time that goldenrod is blooming, ragweed is blooming, but ragweed flowers are tiny and green, and most people don't recognize the ragweed flowers as flowers, but ragweed is a wind pollinated plant. So it is pumping all sorts of pollen into the air, and that's what's causing the allergic reaction in most people. But they see the goldenrod, it's the only flower around, and so it gets blamed. So identification of the goldenrod. Oh, just an important thing here in Texas, there are 19 different species of the goldenrod. So 19, all of them are believed to have the medicinal properties that I will talk about next, but 19 different goldenrod species. So to identify it, it will have the alternating leaves. It will have a round, smooth stem. And it will have the gold flowers in the fall. You will find it in sunny fields and disturbed areas. So this is another plant that can handle just absolute full sun and even very little rain. And it goes, yeah, I like this. I can do this. Medicinal properties. So one of the key things is it's a strengthener of vascular tissue. The best way to understand what this means is varicose veins. So varicose veins occur when your capillaries become more porous than they're supposed to be. And so you get more blood coming out than is coming back in. And so the blood gathers and just basically the red blood cells die and collect around the capillaries, especially in the lower extremities, where there just takes a lot of force to get the blood up. So goldenrod has actually been shown to reduce the varicose veins. It only takes about 2 months for the capillaries to reseal and be rebuilt to the proper level of porosity. It takes another year, though, for all the dead blood that makes the black swollen varicose veins noticeable to be broken down and reabsorbed. And it can even take longer than that. But strengthens vascular tissue. This is a very good antimicrobial. And let me just say, with the goldenrod, it's both the leaves and the flowers have all these properties. I prefer taking the leaves just because the flowers are usually the last flower of the season that bees use to collect the nectar to make their honey for the winter. So if you take the flowers in the fall, you're depriving bees of food. We don't want to do that. But what's really cool about goldenrod is normally it forms just one stalk. And if you snip off just the top 4 inches or so, now it's going to grow multiple stalks up. So it'll grow 3 to 5 stalks where there was just one, it will grow 3 to 5. And each one of those will produce a big flower cluster. So by actually harvesting some of the goldenrod between now and maybe the end of June, middle of July, you will increase the number of flowers available in the fall, which is awesome. So antimicrobial, very good for any bacterial infection located anywhere in the body. So in the lungs, in the gastrointestinal tract, in the bladder, in the kidneys, anywhere bacteria is hanging out and doing things it should not be doing. They can also be used external to prevent infection in wounds. And for that, again, you still make the tisane out of it, and you just wash the wound out with the concentrated goldenrod tisane to prevent any bacteria from taking over in the wound. It's also a very potent anti-inflammatory agent. So if you have arthritis or any of the other inflammation issues, this is going to help with it. The proper way, again, is a tisane or a tincture, and both are good. I really like the flavor of both, but the tisane or the tincture are both good ways of using it. The nice thing about the tincture is it's really good forever. So if you're worried about things now and you have access to vodka, it's not a bad idea to lay aside some goldenrod tinctures for in bad times when you may not have the resources to do this sort of thing. Any questions on goldenrod?
So yes, Mark, well, actually not on goldenrod, but we do have a question related to nettle. And it was, did you say that nettle is good for arthritis?
No. No, the leaves and the flowers of the goldenrod are good.
I think this was for nettle, though.
Oh, nettle. Sorry, I thought you said metal as in like copper, iron. Yes, stinging nettles are very good also. I would actually put stinging nettles slightly above the goldenrod.
Okay. And then,
They do work under different mechanisms. So a mixture of the two increases the likelihood even more that it will help.
okay. And then is goldenrod a perennial?
Not exactly, but it grows from runners. So you'll have a bunch of them connected to roots. And as long as the root is intact, it will put up new plants the next year. So the roots are perennial. The above ground part is not. So
That would be a perennial, I believe.
Okay. Gardeners argue about, it's weird. So I just explain what's going on and let you all decide if it's an annual or perennial.
No worries. But it's not seeding every year from seed, which would be your typical annual. So it's actually a regrowth.
I will warn you, it produces thousands of seeds. So if you plant it in one spot of your yard, 2 years later, you're going to have it all over. But it does reproduce by seeds, but it also reproduces by the runners.
And then I believe this is for varicose veins, would you use goldenrod typically?
Yes, that's my go-to for varicose veins. Those of you who don't know me, I am 6'5", and so the pressure down at the way down there at my feet is very high. I'm about average for my family, and varicose veins is a big problem in my family for everyone but me, because I take the goldenrod every day. I actually put dried goldenrod in my morning coffee. So
the question though was topically, would you use it topically as well as internally?
No, you do need to take it internally.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. So I have to get better headphones here. All right, ready to move on? Next, probably, if not the most medicinal plant on the planet, way up there. So self-heal, AKA heals all, Prunella vulgaris. This is a wild mint found all over the world, and everywhere it's been found, it's been the go-to for medicine men and shamans and healers since prehistory. But being a mint, it does have the opposite alternating leaves. The leaves are hairless. The stem is square and hollow, also in this case hairless. And it has the purple-white flowers, the traditional mint flowers, if I can do it. Yeah, you can't see it, but the kind of the tubular, I like to describe it as a dragon's head sort of flower. And these are blooming right now here in Houston. I know up in your area, you're usually about 2 to 3 weeks behind me, surprisingly enough. So you might be getting some self-heal bloom now, but if not now, very, very, very soon. Being a mint, they do like damp, shady areas, but they don't like leaf litter. So they'll be more like on the north sides of forest openings, where you're getting some grass and some lower sort of plants. You're not getting the big trees, but still in a kind of shaded, damp area. Being a mint, if you plant this in your yard, it will spread. It will spread very vigorously, especially if you have, the damp, shady yard, which is actually a good thing in my book. So medicinal. This is one actually where you would use topically on wounds. So it's been shown to speed up the healing of wounds. This is particularly important in slow to heal wounds like diabetic people get, where the high blood sugar interferes with the healing process. And so self-heal, a poultice or a tea, you can make the strong tea of it, soak some gauze in the tea and apply that to the wound, or just a direct poultice of the entire plant, the flowers and the leaves and the stem mashed up into like a toothpaste type paste and applied to the wound for 10 minutes and then rinse out. I personally like using the gauze method, where you make the strong tea and then soak the gauze in it and apply that to the wound, just because there's less gunk that ends up in the wound And so rinsing it out afterwards is much easier. Okay, it is antimicrobial, so it will help prevent infections of the wounds. It's also antiviral. So there's some really good things, and it interferes with the viral replication. So basically what a virus does is it gets into a cell, hijacks the cellular machinery, and makes that the cell suddenly just make a bunch of viruses until the cell fills up with viruses, ruptures, and releases all these viruses into the body. And the cell field's been shown to interfere with that hijacking of the cellular DNA, cellular machinery by the viral DNA. And in this case, a tea or a tincture, sorry, a tisane or a tincture is really good. So if you are coming down with a cold or the flu or any other number of viral things, strong teas of self-heal will help the body fight the infection. And I'm not going to say like, AIDS or something like that it's going to block that. But for your smaller general purpose viruses where the body just needs a little extra help to kind of override the viral infection, self-heal is great for that. And as I mentioned, for wound, a poultice, and then for the others, a tisane or a tincture. Any questions on the self-heal? Absolute wonderful plant. And I saw Peggy raised her hand, so. Okay.
She wanted, well, we have a question about, do we use the leaves and the flowers?
The whole thing again, all
Okay.
the aerial parts of the plant, waste not, want not.
Okay, and it should be dried. You don't want to use the fresh even for
Right.
the poultice. Okay.
Well, okay, for the poultice, you can use it fresh, but I even still prefer dried. Because you really do, when you're just mechanically rupturing the cells, you're not going to mechanically rupture all the cells. When you're letting the enzymes break down the cell walls, you are going to break down all the cell walls. So the dried will be have a better release of the medicinal compounds.
In all my years of exploring outdoors, I don't think I've ever come across this plant.
Really?
Is it pretty widespread in Texas?
Yeah, I was up in Taylor just a few weeks ago, and there was quite a bit there. Also in Palestine, I've found it, Nacogdoches. So, and if you go to the Foraging Texas website, it includes not only maps at a county level for Texas, but also North America as a whole. What states is it found, and Canadian provinces? But yeah, it's surprisingly common.
Okay.
One of the things I like about it is it has a very distinctive flower head. None of the other mints make this kind of a beehive topping pyramid sort of flower head. So once you see it and recognize it, you're going to start seeing it a lot of places. All right, moving on. Oops, I need to click the button here. All right, horsemint. And again, here in Houston right now, the horsemint is in full bloom, and it will be in full bloom for probably another month or more. But this is another mint. It has the opposite alternating leaves. It has the square hairless stem in this case. Right now, it will have these spotted white flowers in the spring and summer. And underneath these flowers will often be a kind of a purple or pink sepals. So like on the picture here, and actually if we go to the next picture, oh, you find it full sun, sunny fields. So you'll have kind of the white or off-white spotted flowers, and then these pink, just, I want to call it like a tutu around the flowers there. So very, very, very distinctive, very strong smell, very aromatic. It smells somewhat like a cross between oregano and a sweaty horse, or a hot, sweaty horse, hence the name horse mint. So the tea is also pretty strong flavor. I recommend adding some other things like rose petals or blackberry or something like that to kind of mellow the flavor some, because it is a strong flavor, but it is very antimicrobial. Of the different antimicrobial plants, this is actually my favorite, more so than goldenrod, more so than frog fruit. But very, very potent antimicrobial, again, anywhere in the body, lungs, gastrointestinal tract, bladder, kidneys, external also. Anti-inflammatory, on par with goldenrod and stinging nettle. Stinging nettle is still my top one. Goldenrod and horse mint are just below it, but a very good anti-inflammatory thing for any sort of joint pains or other sort of arthritis type issues, lupus inflammation, any of that sort of thing. It's a strong expectorant. And like going back to COVID, where part of the issue is people's lungs start to fill up with gunk. And so to try and expel lung cheese, horse mint tea is very good for that, because it really does a good job of loosening and thinning the phlegm and helping you just get it out. And in this case, again, you would be going with the tisane. The particular compounds are particularly water soluble, and adding alcohol to it actually reduces its potency some. So you want to use these dried flowers, leaves, stems in hot water, not in alcohol. So you do want to harvest this, stock up a lot, and then next year stock up more. Any questions on the horse mint?
The Monarda that we see more here is the Citriodora. Does it have the same properties?
It is slightly less potent.
Okay, good.
It has the same things, but it's like another notch down. That's the totally purple one. It's beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that one is actually great on pizzas as a pizza topping.
Mm.
As a
It does have an
replacement for-
oregano flavor smell for sure.
Yeah, the eugenol. So, but it has slightly less than the horse mint.
And
I
we
do
do
have
have
a
that in the
question.
sale.
Oh, cool.
I have a question that came in, and it is, do you dry the self-heal first?
Yes.
Yes.
And
Okay,
all
thank
these,
you.
dry them all. Yeah. Okay, ready for the next? 3, 2, 1. Skullcap. And again, there are 11 different species of skullcap here in Texas, but it's believed all of them have the same sort of medicinal properties. It is a very potent plant medicinally. So another member of the mint family, opposite alternating leaves, square stem, but in this case, the stem is hairy. It has the blue or pink flowers, and it's not as visible on this picture, but on the next one, the seed pods have this distinctive skullcap shape, like a yarmulke thing. And depending on the type, you'll find the Drummondii in the sunny fields, but there's also ones that do quite well in shade. So the main use of skullcap is for the traumatic brain injury. Skullcap, it has some really interesting compounds that reduce the swelling of the brain after an injury, and also offer other protective properties to a suddenly damaged brain. So if you have a kid in football, and that's a good way to end up with a concussion, this is something you may want to just have on hand in case. So traumatic brain injury. It's also a very potent anti-anxiety. So it helps you just kind of chill out. At the same time, though, it is somewhat of a sedative. So it will also make you drowsy, but it The mechanism and what's going on in your brain with the sedative is slightly different than the anti-anxiety and the traumatic brain injury. But they are going to be like, if you want it for anxiety, be warned, you probably want to have some tea or some other caffeine with it just to kind of fight the sedative effects. But with the traumatic brain injury, really, you want the person to rest. So the sedative is very good. Now, if you are using it to help someone after a traumatic brain injury, please let your doctors know, or their doctors. They should always be made aware of any herbal stuff that the patient is taking, just so that they can check to make sure it's not going to interact badly with other things the doctor wants to do, other potential medicines and so forth. People have a tendency to think it's natural, so there are no side effects. And anything that causes a change in the body won't just cause one change. There will be other changes too. And whereas the side effects are generally not the sort of things you see listed on pharmaceutical commercials, it's still something that the medical professionals need to be aware of if the patient is taking it. And this is one, again, that makes a very good tea for any of these sort of properties. And you can see the skull caps. Hopefully you can see my mouse pointing to these. They're little disc shaped or raindrop flat discs that have kind of a cup shape that would kind of fit on the skull. So again, here in Texas, there is 11 different species of it, and they all are believed to have these medicinal properties.
And I do want to remind folks, we do have several skull caps available in the sale.
Yep. It's definitely one I grow in my medicinal garden in my backyard. Any questions? All right. If not.
Yes, we do.
Whoop,
Sorry,
whoop.
it takes me a minute to find
Okay.
my little unmute button.
Yeah.
So some of the questions are, must everything be dried? Can any be fresh? And in conjunction, and the second part of the question is, what's the best way to store these dried materials?
Okay, so always dry the herbs. Again, when you allow it to air dry, there's enzymes that break holes through all of the cell walls, so you're getting the maximum amount of medicinal properties. The formulas I gave at the very beginning of the presentation are all using the air dried. If you dehydrate it, put it in the oven, something like that, you're not going to break down the cell walls. So the potency of your medications are going to be much lower. As far as storing it, after about 2 to 3 weeks of air drying, the stuff should be ready. Once it kind of crumbles, at that point, you want to store it in some sort of airtight container out of sunlight and even away from all the LED and fluorescent lights we have in our houses now, because those put out wavelengths of light that can over time damage the compounds in the leaves. It's really recommended amber glass. So not just having it in a cupboard somewhere out of light, but even have it in an amber glass. So when you take it out and you're making the tea and you forget about it on the counter, you're still protecting it from sunlight just to go sideways. That's why with my products that I actually sell, all of them are sold in the amber glass bottles. So airtight containers, someplace cool, someplace dry, someplace hidden from the light in between when you're not using it. Any other questions?
Yes, we've got another question. Is there a plant that is typically mistaken for skullcap?
Okay, here we'll go sideways here for a second. I tell people, as a forager or as someone trying to identify plants, if you can count to 5, you have the necessary skill set to properly identify a plant. With skullcaps, there's really nothing that looks like it because nothing else has these little skullcap little seed pods. So when I say if you can count to 5, if you can match 5 structural features of the plant you're looking at, versus a resource guide, my book, or, Sam Thayer's book, or John Slatterly's book, or Foraging Texas website. If you match 5 structural features, you'll have identified it well enough to use it. And these are like how the leaves are arranged, where the leaves are arranged, where the flowers are, what color are the flowers, what petal, how many petals do they have, what time of year is it, where is it growing? There's lots and lots and lots of different structural features, but if you can match 5, then you're within the realm of properly identifying it to the level of using it. But like I said, in the case of skullcap, nothing else has these little skullcap sort of seed pods. Any other questions? All right, moving on. Prickly pear cactus. So when it comes to prickly pear cactus, or the Opanita species, there's somewhere in the 90s as far as how many different species there are of it. Again, all of them are believed to have the same medicinal properties. So it doesn't matter which one you find as long as it is a prickly pear. And these have the large flat pads that have both the long thorns and the tiny little glochids. In the spring, they'll have yellow-orange flowers. In the fall, they'll have purple or red fruit, and you'll find them in sunny fields. Medicinally, they're awesome. So one of the first things is blood sugar control. So the young pads, the nopales or nopalitas, that slime in the cactus, it's very good at binding to sugar chemically and holding on to the sugar, which means then if you are eating prickly pear cactus with some tortillas, which are high in starch, which your body breaks down into sugars, or a beer, or anything that will either have sugar or be turned into sugar in your digestive tract, that sugar, instead of instantly being shoved into your bloodstream, it will be grabbed by the slime, the mucilage of the prickly pear cactus, which will then just slowly release it, or may not even release it before it passes all the way through the digestive tract. So the prickly pear cactus pads are one of the best blood sugar control agents out there as far as wild plants go, because they grab onto that sugar and only slowly release it. So along that same lines, then, it also helps with weight loss. If you are trying to diet, if you're trying to lose weight, the consumption of the prickly pear, and it only takes like a third of a cup with the meal, and it can be just the jars of the stuff, like the Goya brand nopales you buy at H-E-B or Kroger. Just add that to each meal, mix it in the salad, you can put it in the sandwich, anything like that. Once you're starting eating it, you really don't notice it, but it helps with weight loss. The fruit, the red ripe fruit, it helps with cholesterol. It has some really strong antioxidants in there that are really good at just helping bust up and get rid of cholesterol from the body. So the pads don't help with cholesterol, but the fruit does. And in this case, eating the pads and the fruit is what you want to do. And it doesn't matter if it's cooked or not. It doesn't matter, if it's store-bought, if it's in a jar or anything like that, it's still usable, still has some medicinal properties. So any questions about prickly pears?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So, does the mucus of okra have a similar impact on sugars?
Yes. In fact, all slimy plant have that. So okra, slimy, it does the same sort of binding the sugar. And the wild plant, aloe vera, like the slime from aloe vera plants will do it. I will warn you, that's very bitter. Wild violets, spiderwort, even chickweed. But yeah, any of the slimy plant foods, that mucilage that makes that slime, all of it binds the sugar. So they all work as a way to help control blood sugar. And then also
And then
helps
there was
with-
a question, I believe you commented on it, but do you eat the pads cooked only?
No, they can be cooked, raw, pickled. It doesn't matter. They retain their properties. Every
And someone's
morning,
been-
yeah, every morning I chop up a third of a cup of it and add it to my scrambled eggs, and it's good. Just to help.
I was personally going to ask what a good recipe is, so adding it to scrambled eggs sounds
Yep.
perfect to me.
Yep.
And
It's also really good in smoothies, because a lot of smoothies, you're using a lot of different fruit, which has wonderful health benefits, but also a lot of sugar. And so by adding prickly pear cactus into the smoothie, it helps bind up the sugar from the fruit that your body doesn't need, but allows all the other good stuff from the fruit to go into you. So
very good. And then I think someone jokingly asked, but I'll go ahead and ask it, is does fried okra count?
So you're kind of overloading the system there. I love fried okra, but you're better off with pickled okra. Because with the fried okra, you're really getting, not only are you getting the breading, which is starch, which gets broken into sugar, most likely you're frying it in some sort of canola oil, which has its own health issues. So stick to the pickled okra or
And what
gumbos.
about, I guess, the fruit? Because the only thing I've done is make jelly with it. So
Yeah, and that
probably
jelly,
negates the
so,
benefits.
well, okay, so the fruit does not have the blood sugar control or weight loss. It does help with the anti-cholesterol, but again, yeah, what I like doing is actually juicing the fruit, just squeezing the juice out and drinking that. But you can also
Okay,
put the
thank you. I'll
fruit
have to
in
try
the,
that.
yeah, you can also put the fruit in your smoothie. They're very sweet. The fruit to me tastes almost like raspberries if you get a good one. All right, any other questions? We're getting close to the end here. Next up,
We do. How do you remove prepare the pads to remove the spines?
Okay, that's one of the benefits of buying them already in a jar because the spines are removed. But yeah, to remove them, what I do first, you got to get them in the spring when they're still young, and the big thorns are still more like little green kind of nubbins. I don't know how well you can see on the pictures here, but you have these little sort of things that will eventually turn into the big thorns. But I will just run my knife across the back and front surfaces of the pads and on the sides and just scrape them clean. Or if I'm in a hurry, I will burn the glochids off either with a propane torch or just over a fire. So the little glochids and the thorns, you hit them with flame and they will shrivel up and no longer stab into you.
And I
If you
would
want-
suggest that you harvest them with a pair of long tongs.
Yes. Yep. And they will go through leather gloves, the little glochids.
Yes, they will.
Yeah. Any other questions on the prickly pear?
I think that covers us for now.
Okay, Passiflora incarnata, the passion vine. This is a beautiful vine, has these alternating tri-lobed leaves, so they kind of have like a trident sort of shape there. They'll have tendrils wrapping around to help it grab onto and climb fences and trees and anything else. The flowers really look like some alien creature. And if you're lucky during the summer, you will get these round kiwi-sized maypops, which is an edible fruit. But the fruits aren't edible really until late summer. But the medicinal uses of the passion vine or Passiflora, the leaves are a very potent sedative. In fact, a lot of the sleepy time tea that you buy in the grocery store now will list Passiflora as one of the ingredients. The flowers are really interesting because they are very potent anti-anxiety herb, I guess, and you can eat them raw. You can make the tisane out of it. I like them just raw. And then also the flowers help reduce the moodiness associated with menopause. The way these flowers work is they are loaded with a compound called GABA, aminobutyric acid, which the brain turns into serotonin. The issue, though, is if you consume something with GABA, it can't cross the blood-brain barrier. The GABA has to be made in the brain. But somehow the GABA aminobutyric acid from the passion vine, makes it into the brain, increasing the raw materials that the brain then turns into the serotonin. So the big thing right now that the medicinal chemists are looking at is we believe there's another molecule in the passion vine flower that unlocks that blood-brain barrier, allowing compounds that wouldn't normally be able to cross it to cross it. So that's really exciting because that's one of the big issues with treating the brain medicinally is a lot of the medicines can't get to the brain where it needs to be to do its thing. So, but if you have trouble sleeping, a tea made from the leaves is very potent. Or if you just have general anxiety or moodiness or just kind of even a depression sort of thing, the flowers will help with that. So are there any questions about the passion vine?
And we do have this one in the sale as well.
There you go. It's a very good, I will warn you, you'll plant it in one spot in your yard and then following years it will pop up everywhere because this is another one that sends runners and it will send the runners quite far. So just be ready for that. But all that means is you're getting a lot more medicine. All right. Another one, the purple sage, the purple Texas sage, alternating gray velvety leaves, purple fuzzy flowers, woody stems. The flowers appear, sometimes it's called the barometer plant because the flowers appear during times of high humidity, which often lead to rain. And this loves full sun. If you leave it in the shade, it will never get its full glory. It will just stay kind of small and spindly. So if you want this plant, you want to plant it in an area that just gets absolute full sun. Medicinally, the leaves and flowers, but mainly the leaves, are a very potent antimicrobial agent, can be used internally or externally. It's the tea made from the leaves is a very good decongestant. So if you have a head cold or stuffy head, congestion, the tea will help that break that up. And it is a cough suppressant. So if you're about to head to the opera or ballet, and you don't want to be annoying everyone around you, the purple sage tea will help suppress coughing. And again, you want to make this in the tisane, the hot water version from the leaves. You can use the flowers, but the flowers appear just randomly. And when they do appear, the bees go crazy over the plant. Again, as a bee lover, I will let the flowers stay for the bees and just use the leaves for the medicine. So any questions about the purple sage?
I am not seeing anything.
All right. Okay, and this is Agarita. This is actually more of a hill country plant. It prefers the alkaline soil. So if you do want to grow it in your yard, it does require a partial shade and alkaline soils. I will tell you the Oregon grape has all the same medicinal properties that I'll be mentioning, but the Oregon grape isn't native. But the Agarita has the sharp 3-leaflet leaves, yellow flowers with red berries. And if you, this is a hill, mainly a hill country plant. And if you're up in the hill country, going up there in the next 3 weeks or so, you will see these plants covered with red berries. The red berries are absolutely delicious. Go ahead and eat them. But it has a very distinct yellow wood if you cut it open. Very yellow. And this yellow is due to a compound called berberine, which has some really amazing medicinal powers. First, it's extremely potent antimicrobial. Internally or externally, the berberine, the yellow compound, the yellow molecule, will fight infections anywhere in the body. The berberine also interferes with the transfer of sugar from the digestive tract into the blood. So it doesn't do anything with the insulin. It just interferes with the sugar's ability to pass into the blood. And so it's great for helping control blood sugar. But the most important property, immortality. So let's talk about that. I can't promise you will be immortal due to this plant, but berberine has a really neat power that it helps maintain the length of telomeres. Telomeres are the strands of junk DNA that protect your good DNA from damage. And scientists have shown that the length of, when you're born, you have like really long telomeres. Let's see here. But as you age, those telomeres get shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter from the damage they suffer protecting the good DNA. The physical aspects of aging, like the saggy skin, the balding, the crankiness, all the stuff that occurs as you get older can be directly correlated with the length of the telomeres. And berberine maintains the length of the telomeres. With things like fruit flies and guinea pigs and lab rats and monkeys, they've added an extra 25% to 200% to the lifespan of the creatures by giving them doses of berberine. There's a whole bunch of people out there right now that are taking berberine every day with the hopes of, maybe not being immortal, but definitely maintaining their youthful vigor and physical abilities by protecting their telomeres. Now, this berberine is not water soluble. It needs to be dissolved in alcohol and usually above 100 proof. So this is the case where you probably want like a Bacardi 151 and just make a cocktail with that every night and use a bit of agarita as a swizzle stick and just swirl it in your cocktail for about 30 seconds before you add any of the other stuff to your cocktail. And you will get the berberine you need. An amazing plant. Any questions on the agarita?
And not on agarita, but the question was on the purple sage. Is that the same as Texas Ranger?
Yeah, and there's like 3 or 4.
Texas sage, I guess is the other.
Yeah, all the leucophyllum. Yeah, all 4 of those, I believe there's 4 in Texas, all have these same medicinal properties.
That they need to be the leucophyllum sages, not, correct. There's another Texas one that I saw called that they sometimes call Texas sage that's not in that leucophyllum.
Okay. Yeah, there's the Sesno is. So sometimes there's a common name, Sesno or Sesnia. Senisa. Okay, thank you. Yeah, that one.
Okay. On the agarita, is there any medicinal property to the berries?
Not so much to the berries. However, the leaves are a very potent anti-nausea. So if you're dealing with car sickness or hungover or something like that, I will not recommend it for morning sickness because it has not been tested on babies and fetuses. But other sorts of nausea, it helps. The leaves, the dried leaves made into a tea, work really well. But the wood is the really potent one that is useful for really everyone.
And even the small stems would have sufficient berberine to.
Yep, as long as they're yellow. And what I recommend, I'll take like a stick the thickness of my finger, peel it to get down to the yellow wood, and then stir the alcohol with that 30 seconds. And over time, the yellow will fade. And then so you just carve, like another millimeter off to get fresh yellow wood, and you got all more berberine. So you can get a lot of berberine from these. Now you don't want to overdo it, because large amounts of it can lead to liver damage. That's why you just want to swirl in, like a Bacardi 151 or a stronger whiskey or rye for just 30 seconds once a day.
A question, and I'm not sure if it means where can you find azurita that looks like it's a tree, or I'm not one.
Yeah, it's actually about a 4-foot tall bush. It doesn't really get any taller than like 4 feet, which, and then it gets it is multi-trunk, so it can get like six trunk or 6 feet across. But you will have to, especially up where you're at, you'll probably have to amend the soil with quite a bit of lime. Or
we're very alkaline in most of our cross timbers.
Oh, okay, sweet.
But
okay.
It's probably more common in the rolling plains out towards Abilene area.
Yeah.
The Agarita, the Albertsons in Weatherford has hedges and hedges of Agarita that does
nice.
beautifully.
All right, there you go.
It may be getting pruned a lot now.
Yeah. It probably
But it
needs
is
good
growing
drainage
right next
too.
to the railroad track.
Oh, wow. Good to know. It doesn't grow down here in Houston, not in our soil. Ours is way too acidic. We're more piney wood. Any other questions on Agarita?
Yes.
Okay.
I guess let me give you like 2. How long will a harvested stem last in storage? And then the second question is, do you still use a tincture with Agurita?
Yeah, so you do want to do the tincture because the berberine is not soluble in water. If you do it in water, you might get a little yellow color from some other molecules, but you will not get the berberine. So you definitely have to use alcohol for this. As far as how long is it good, 2 years and then replace it. And you want to keep it stored airtight. I would leave the bark on until you're actually ready to use it, just as another way of preventing oxygen from getting into it. Because that's the main thing. The oxygen will just slowly react with the stuff and break it down that way. So if you really want to go full blast, oxygen absorbers in like Mylar vacuum sealed bags will probably get you 4 or 5 years out of it. But for most people, in some sort of glass jar tucked away in a cupboard or something like that, 2 years.
Do you want to take any more questions now, or you want to wait?
On Agarita, well, actually, I think, yeah, that's the last slide there. So at this point, if you have any other questions, either about Agarita or anything else that we talked about tonight.
So comment was just use it as a swizzle stick.
Yep, 30 seconds.
And then painted, just a comment that there's a place that's got some for sale right now. And then does Texas barberry have the same properties as Azurita?
I want to say yes, because it is a Mahonia, isn't it? Or wait. Okay, I hate common names because even depending on what part of the state you're in, that's not also the one known as the Southern Wax Myrtle. I will tell you, Heavenly Bamboo, the Nandina, has it, and the Oregon Grape has it. I forget what species.
What we commonly call Texas barberry is Mahonia swazii.
Okay, yeah, that one. Yeah. It's a very common property in all the Mahonias.
I'm excited about trying the Agarita branches, and but it is a difficult plant to find in the nursery trade.
Yeah.
It's so slow growing that it takes a long time to get a sellable plant. And I know that's part of the reason that a lot of people don't want to sell it. So definitely, we were looking for it for the plant sale, but we were not able to get any.
One thing I recommend is drive around your neighborhood and look for people that have the heavenly bamboo or Nandina planted in it. Knock on the door and say, hey, I'm from the Native Plant Society, and this is a really bad plant. Here's a list of plants that would look good there in place of it. And if you replace it, can I have this one? Because I want to do something with the wood.
I've already ripped all mine out.
Yeah. Like I said, the fortune favors the bold, especially when it comes to foraging and asking people for their plants.
Yes. 2 years ago, I bought the Agarita at Nature's Way Resources. Are y'all familiar with that nursery?
No.
I'm not.
It's okay. It's near Conroe.
Oh, really?
Conroe, Texas, and it's I think FM 1488 and I-45, that vicinity. Nature's Way Resources.
I'll have to check that out. That's actually kind of near where I live.
Good. That was it.
Okay, cool. See, Wendy.
Yes. Thank you. When you say you put the stick with the Agarita, a swizzle stick and the alcohol, how much alcohol? And like, when you're saying about drink it, because it
Yeah,
makes
so a normal cocktail, about 3 ounces, 2 to 3 ounces.
okay, 150 proof a day.
Well, not every day.
Okay, because I'm like thinking the liver, I'm just thinking other things about alcohol damage. And
Well, I also take all sorts of other herbal supplements and medications and so forth. But you can like make a tincture more concentrated and just add a few drops into other things. But that gets a little tricky because you don't quite know when you're going over. Like you can make some rough calculations. If I make it twice as strong, I only need half as much. So.
okay, so maybe once a week or so, 2 to 3 ounces, whizzle 30 seconds.
Yeah.
With a
Or
stick.
yeah, make the 3 ounces, but only have 1 ounce of it during the day,
Okay.
and spread it out. You may not protect everything all at once, but you'll protect at least a third of your body every day.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes, I was wondering if, and I think you answered the question, you can't make it and leave it on the shelf.
So the berberine tincture you can, but again, you want to have it in some sort of dark bottle and store it in a cupboard or something away from any sort of light source.
Well, how long would you leave the Agarita in the?
That's where it gets a little tricky. And I will say, I have resources not available to the common person. So as my work as a chemist, I can actually measure how much berberine is in my stuff. So I think I actually answered that question with my mind, not your resources. It would definitely be safer to make it fresh, at the very least every week, instead of stirring 30 seconds, maybe stir it, 4 minutes and then divide it by 8.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yeah. Let's see, Catherine Stanley. Catherine.
Yes, so I have a question that came in. Are all parts of Agarita used if you're making a tincture?
No, just the inner wood, not the leaves, not the berries, not the outer bark. You just need that yellow inner wood.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. I guess, Gwen, do you have another question? I see your hand's still up there. Gwen Williams?
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yep, yep.
So I am more of a chemist mind, and I was curious if you had any books related to herbal medicine with the chemistry thought process in mind as well that I could look up.
Yeah, if you actually go to the foragingtexas.com, there is a link there to Amazon that has my recommended herbal medicine books. And all of them go into the chemistry of what's going on. Particular authors here in Texas, John Slattery, Slattery, John Slattery's Southwest Medicinal Plants.
Oh, I think I have that.
Yeah, he's a good one. And then it's been so long since I've looked at him. There's another one I really like. What is his name? Actually, I got it here. But yeah, if you go to that, there is the
Okay.
Yeah, and you might have to scroll around some as to where, but at the bottom of the pages. Oh yeah, on the bottom left-hand side, there's recommended foraging books and gear. And that will take you to the Amazon where it has the different like recommended foraging books, recommended resources for kids, edible landscaping. But there's the herbal medicine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Herbal medicine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have that one yet.
Yeah. Well, it's the herbal medicine books.
Yeah,
Michael
yeah,
Moore. Yeah. Charles W. Kane. He's the other one that's really good about the medicine or the actual chemistry. Charles W. Kane. Yeah, and he has Medicinal Plants of the American Southwest.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll have to look those up. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Ruth Ann had a question earlier about do you use the leaves and the flowers, but I am not sure which plant that was on. So Ruth Ann, if you want to unmute.
I will say a basic rule of thumb, if you are dealing with a member of the mint family, throw everything into it. The leaves, the stems, the flowers. If it is a more woody type bush, then it will probably be more selective as to what parts you use. So like with the purple sage, it was the leaves. With the agarita, it was the wood.
And then there was a question earlier from Wendy about how much to Tasane goldenrod in a cup, tablespoon.
Like dried or
I
well,
think that's if you're wanting to drink it is what I'm thinking, but maybe I'm wrong.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I put that as my first question. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yep. And let me just bring that slide up here. So the basic, yeah, one heaping tablespoon of dried plant material in 8 ounces of hot water. Just to have a repeatable amount. As a scientist, I like doing things the same way each time.
All I can say is for all the women I've known that have suffered with varicose veins and goes and get them stripped, I am just in shock because I think I've had goldenrod in my yard and I didn't know it was goldenrod and
Ooh.
God put it there. And I'm just so excited. All these things like, oh, that's what that is. That I plant half this stuff. They just drifted in. And I'm feeling very blessed right now by your presentation. Thank you. And knowing now what's in my yard that I didn't even put in there. So this is exciting.
That makes me happy.
Hi, this has been wonderful. I follow you on Instagram.
Oh, cool.
The stinging nettle, is it a mint?
Yes, it is in the mint family, or maybe one step up. But yeah, I want to say it's Lamiaceae. It definitely has the opposite alternating leaves, the square hollow stem. And if you were looking at the flowers there, they look like the mint. So
Thank you.
yep. And it spreads like a mint too. So keep that in mind. if you go to the foragingtexas.com website, like I said, it has 225 plants on it currently, how to identify it, multiple pictures of each, any medicinal properties, how to use it for that. If there's any toxic mimics, how to tell it apart, often with side-by-side pictures, and Texas range maps showing what counties in Texas it has been found. So very, very useful resource. And then some of you already follow me on Facebook and Instagram, and then also the YouTube, and then my herbal medicine stuff at medicinemanplantco.com. And I do have a bunch of, I have the Instagram and Facebook and YouTube channels separate for that, where I post stuff every day too. So.
Thank you so much, Mark. This was very informative. And I thought we had a great turnout and lots of great